So I would suggest that when people are seeking coaches, that they work with people who really do understand healthcare
Yeah.
and the way the physician mind is set.
I love you called that out. Like, I'll give you an example, length of stay. Length of stay is a ubiquitous issue. There's so much required to create growth and traction. It's a rich petri dish. Yeah. And somebody at the top goes, "Move it."
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Figure it out.
Sure.
But without all of those other skills and
Yeah.
all of the requirements that you just mentioned in this giant petri dish of healthcare, it's a struggle. What do you think most CEOs want from a CMO?
I think an effective CMO learns to be bilingual. Bilingual is the language and the experiences of the CEO. So years ago, I had a CEO I was coaching say to me in a weaker moment or an honest moment, Joe, this would be a really good gig if it weren't for the docs.
Hello and welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and along with a fabulous team at the CMO Group, we bring you the most crucial conversations in healthcare and physician leadership. The CMO Group is the only physician-run, physician-led organization solely focused on chief medical officers and exists to transform how physicians lead. The CMO Group helps emerging physician leaders move from expert operators to enterprise leaders through a unique transformational process. Healthcare doesn't just need good doctors and leadership, it needs high-powered executives with deep medical knowledge and who hold strong to their oath. That transformation is the work of the CMO Group. Today's guest is one of my personal favorites. Once upon a time, I was only half as good as I thought I was, so my boss provided me with not just one professional executive coach, but two. Perhaps the math was simply that with double the effort and tag teaming approach, I might eventually go from half as good to fully realized. Our guest today is Joe Mazzenga, managing partner at NuBrick Partners, a leadership development firm consisting of highly trained psychologists and organizational development experts who provide an integrated, systemic approach to talent management with a keen focus on the healthcare industry. Joe earned his bachelor's degree in human resources and organizational development from Trinity International University in Illinois, followed by a master's degree in social work and counseling psychology from George Williams College, also in Illinois. Joe developed and led a multidisciplinary, multi-practitioner psychotherapy practice for 17 years and was on the medical staff of Lutheran General Hospital and Advocate Aurora Health Hospital before finding himself involved in a variety of roles in the world of talent acquisition and management with clients including Northwestern Medicine, BJC Healthcare, North Shore University Health System, and the Hospital for Special Surgery. Joe has also taught courses on change management at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. With over 30 years of experience in executive team assessment and performance and leadership development, Joe is a key thought leader in the world of transformational executive management, especially in times of organizational and cultural change. Joe, welcome to the show.
Wow, I don't know who that is, but I'm gonna listen in.
I know who he is. He was my former coach, and it
I
is
love that.
fantastic to have you back
I love it.
with me and on this show.
Very grateful, excited. I forgot the double teaming story. I kinda let that one go, but I'm glad you remember that. Those are fond memories, and you took it all in.
Listen, I owe a lot to you and our partner in crime, Andy Hartman. You and I met about a decade ago, and
Right?
you are one of the few people that still talk to me after many life changes, which probably says a lot more about you and maybe even a lot more about me that you're still willing to talk to me. So I appreciate you being here. I really do. And I'm indebted to you and Andy for developing my
Thank you.
executive skills and my knowledge and my abilities. And since no good deed goes unpunished, I have to get further in your debt by having you on this podcast to help me out. So, a lot of our audience is comprised of rising leaders in healthcare, both physicians and non-physicians. And I truly believe what you do and your team is very important about developing abilities in healthcare leadership. So let's get into this, and I'm going to hit you with questions. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm so ready. Thank you.
Okay. So let's start with this. Many aspiring chief medical officers believe that their clinical credibility and years of experience in the white coat and in medicine will carry them right into their executive role. How have you seen that play out? And if those same individuals find that it doesn't work out, is this the place where coaching sits?
It's a great question, and it's one I'm continually asked. I think it is unfortunately hit or miss. The outcome, the rate of success of that transition is really hit or miss, and it's based on context and the person's relationships. I'm sorry, relational intelligence, personality factors. But it's too abstract and too vague to commit to. I don't think it's an automatic, and I think there's a lot to learn. And executive coaching most prominently is used and leveraged in transition situations. Somebody moving in, somebody moving up, and it's a major transition. And you know, because you made that transition a number of times. It's a major transition. It is a new land. You're expected to be bilingual. You haven't spoken the language before. So executive coaching is a very powerful asset and resource when it's recognized that it's not a remedial opportunity. It's an investment in your success.
So you made a comment that it's hit or miss, and you make a very fine point, which I agree. It is a huge transition to go from that physician identity to
Yeah,
taking on these new roles and responsibilities. And it's not as though you lose the role of physicianness or doctoring,
correct.
but it's
Correct.
taking on that extra identity, if you will. So when there's a miss, and you had a hit and a miss phrase, what are barriers or obstacles that maybe one or two that come to mind that make that difficult for folks?
That's a great question. I have to go no further than the first time I met you. I literally remember where I was standing when you came up to me, you approached me. I was at the whiteboard and we were at an offsite. I remember the building we were in, and it was a break, and it might have been a break because the hurricane was fast approaching, but you came up to me and I knew who you were. I didn't meet you, perhaps. It was a large room of people, and your questions demonstrated to me your vulnerability, meaning I like to learn, I want to learn, I don't know enough, I want to learn more, and humility. It was a very powerful um, cocktail of the way in which you showed up with me, which you walked away and I thought, this guy gets it. He wants more. This is the kind of appetite we need. Contrast that to you have been, as a physician subject matter expert, confident and competent. And so it's difficult to take that identity, move it aside and say, man, I just got tossed into the deep end of the pool. And they're asking me to engage in all kinds of ways that I have no informal or formal training in all of those years of my schooling and fellowship and residency.
That is so insightful and it resonates with me. And that's one of the things we're working on at the CMO group, which
Thank
we
you.
can talk about another time. But
Yeah.
it is a challenge to take on an adaptive set of identities and skills and knowledge. And you articulated it very nicely. So on that
Thank
day,
you.
in fact, there was a hurricane approaching and
You're right. You're right.
we had to call a big timeout, and that's also another story for another day. But when you do begin to work with physician leaders, me and others, where do you generally begin? And let's assume for this discussion that they come in a little bit more of an open book like I was,
Right.
and let's not talk about the miss. Let's talk about the hits. Where do you generally begin with the right substrate in front of you?
With the right substrate, I typically begin with understanding and really gaining their remit in their leader. What is the remit of their leadership? What is the expectation of what are they responsible to drive, influence, lead, tend to? What are the outcomes? What will success look like? Measurable, I mean, quantitative and qualitative. Give me that. Let me know. Then I want to know things like, what's your why? Why are you doing this? What's driving you? What is behind that story? I don't want to make up that story. I want to know what it is. And then third of all, I'd like to ask them, what are you challenged by when in this role that you're in? What is it that you can't get your arms around, you don't quite know, but you understand it's important. Lee, in all due respect, I often say early on in the relationship, what's unfair to you is that the frontline supervisor at Walmart gets more development in leading teams, building talent, change management, conflict resolution, building the bench than you do. And you're going to be responsible for most of what I just shared. And where are you going to learn that? And certainly what you desire to be because you've always been confident and competent. And I remember an early experience of a physician that was put in. into the deepest end of the pool I've ever seen anybody tossed into. About the third meeting, I was sitting across him. I said, "Let me look at your calendar." He turned it around. It was, of course, filled. And what I extrapolated, I said, it looks like you're trying to become the next CFO of this organization, but you have one. There's not enough time left in your career to become that guy. So you need to find those people that you can lean in, trust, learn from, and let's find what your highest and best use is and move you in that direction.
I have used that phrase, the highest and best use. You taught that to me very early on, and I still hold fast to that.
Wow.
And I think what you're also speaking to is helping the physician understand what is the highest and best use in the executive role. We
Correct.
already know the physician has established their highest and best use in the OR, in the emergency department, at the bedside. That's a given because that's where they're at. But
Yeah.
as they move to these new roles, defining the highest, with or without Walmart based training or not,
Right.
it's not even
Exactly.
clear if the physician knows what that phrase means. And I will suggest it took me a while to really understand, and you outline it nicely. What is it is that is expected of me, and what do I expect of me? So what does
Hmm.
the boss, the organization, the team need, but what do I need as well? And then
Yes.
working through those dynamics to bring that to bear, the why,
Yep.
how are you going to approach this new setting? So I love that. Let's go to the next thing, which is a kind of a three-part question. We'll take it in chunks. So for those leaders, physician leaders who successfully transition into system level leaders, are there things that you have observed that separates them from those who sort of stall?
Yeah. Uh, that's a great question. So, like when I think about a system leader, I translate that to the word enterprise, the enterprise leader, and I think about metaphorically in a battleship or an aircraft carrier, there's the deck and there's the bridge. Bridge is usually like 13 stories high. The view from the bridge is very different than the view from the deck. Very different. And until you actually do it once, I did it once at a retired aircraft carrier in La Jolla. It was a very powerful experience. That mindset is a shift because the physician has been on the deck doing the work on the deck and brilliantly and effectively and successfully. Everybody that shows up at the enterprise level table has been a SME, a subject matter expert in their domain. Marketing, HR, finance, engineering, operations, and then the physician shows up. He or she is. They've thrown one pitch and they've got that pitch down. They have to be successful. They have to recognize that I have to take that hat off that got me here. What got me here won't get you here. The axiom fits. And now I have to start to train my mindset to think about what is my perspective on the entire enterprise as I look out from this bridge across all of the dimensions that are at play to help us be successful as a system. That is one of the most difficult transitions. And here's what I'll tell you about it. Sounds like it's a cheeky thing to say, but the development plan for becoming an enterprise leader is 3 words long. Figure it out. That's that's my experience of it. Again, you get more training to become a frontline supervisor than we put you here now. And it's hard in many cases for the physician to take off his or her hat and think about the rest of the organization. Well, they talk about finances. One of the things that we'll move into personality assessment. Physicians, most of you could speak for yourself at some point, Lee. At 21 or 22, you weren't signing up to make money. You weren't going to be broke. That wasn't, but you had many other intrinsic motivations to make that commitment. How do we honor those and recognize those in this story too?
Yeah, that's probably a whole episode on internal motivators and
Hmm.
then later in life, external motivators. And then for
You
many of us,
bet.
we return to our intrinsic motivation. So very well stated. And I also learned a phrase also either from you or Andy, get the balcony view. Get
Hmm.
up and look down. And so whether we're using the analogy of the aircraft carrier from being on deck to all the way up or in the balcony at the theater,
Yeah.
getting up and looking down. Yeah, I do agree. Oftentimes there is a figure it out, and the expectation again is you're smart, you're
Hmm.
competent, you're skilled. We don't need to put you through a Walmart frontline training experience. You know what to do. You're smart, figure it out. And I think that's a failure in some instances. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I probably shared this with you. It's not my language, but that extrapolated authority can get in the way of if I was competent in the OR, I must be competent here. Well, no, you can't fly a plane, even though you're brilliant. So there's that's where that humility comes into play, that vulnerability at work in a business setting. Vulnerability sounds like, Lee, can you teach me how to do this? I've never seen this before. I don't know. And the other thing, when I work closely with you guys and gals over time, you're capable of saying to me, at the end of the day, the way we most of the time operated is to think we're never wrong, but we're often in doubt. Well, you can be in doubt here. We don't expect it. You have brilliance. What I think struggle with, or what I work with in coaching, is you you really have a confident competence model, but it took you 16 years to get there.
Hmm.
You don't have 16 years to get competent here.
Right.
So how do we expedite that, leverage it? And I was just talking about this. The Navy SEALs is one of the most rigorous experiences for an individual to complete and graduate from. But yet, when you're deployed out of an airplane and you hit the ground, you are trained to ask yourself two questions. Number one, where am I? Number two, where's my buddy? Well, who's my buddy? Who do I lean on? That's another part of how we succeed. It's a
Yeah.
team approach.
And while many of us at the bedside and at the front lines work with a huge number of team members, we usually don't have another oncologist standing next to me or another emergency room physician standing next to her or
Yep.
another surgeon. Yes, in highly complex situations, you have multiple people, but 95% of the time, there's nobody. And
Yep.
if
Yep.
if that is a requirement of leading a team, of knowing who you're leaning on, then yeah, that's a new skill that has
Mhm.
to be learned. So let's hit part two of this question. So we've identified what separates those from those who stall as they rise to the enterprise level and how they have to have that mindset of being up in the balcony. What are the behaviors or how do they lead to be effective at that high level? Just a couple, one or two behaviors that really manifest well.
I think a couple of things. A couple of underrated competencies of leaders. Curiosity is a very powerful tool in the arsenal of a newer leader entering in that. You are curious. You are all curious as physicians, but you're going to listen. You're going to take it in. And a lot of times you are paid to speak. You are paid to use your words. What's the quote of how long does it take for a physician to interrupt a patient's story? Between 9 and 14 seconds. So I think it's curiosity. I think it's listening, this sense of who needs to know what I just learned and what I just heard. One of the underused competencies is this notion of informing. Who needs to know what we're talking about, what I learned, what I discovered, what I decided? The
Yeah.
last thing I would say is once you're curious and you establish a psychologically safe atmosphere around you, now weigh in with your ideas. Speak up.
I,
Use your voice.
those are two parts of perhaps the same dimension. As a clinician, what comes to mind is I formulate in my brain a whole list of differential things, orders, results, conclusions, and I put it into a document. And then I go to the next. I don't necessarily know that all of us have developed the habit of calling the cardiologist or calling the neurologist and say, I just want you to know, I started this, I did this. I think you might need to know this because I know tomorrow you're going to do a procedure. And if we don't develop that habit, that traps us in that executive system enterprise level of communicating up. So that's one part of that
That's
dimension.
a
And the other part of
perfect
the
story.
dimension is making sure I am speaking up, not just who needs to know, but am I articulating it in a way that they receive it in an effective way for them to adjust to their role and their responsibility. Is accurate?
That is exactly right. And then and the role that the executive coach, I know we're going to get to that, but the role the executive coach and I play is that holding up a mirror to the individual and say, you need to make that comment, but you could have made it a different way. It landed this way on me if you said it that way. I'd hear it as arrogant, I'd hear it as judgmental. Is there a way that you can land that so that it's viewed as what else you have? Man, that was amazing. What else do you have? Or are you shutting down conversations? Are you creating space? So that's the role of a coach. I can't wait because I've been in executive teams where the CMO is in the closet until we need him or her to come out and then we'll put you back because they're not adding value the entire time. That's a shame.
Yeah.
But that CMO might have created that dynamic, that atmosphere as well. So that's one of the roles in which we play.
Yeah, and I think that essentially answered the third part of this question is in expanding one's own curiosity, open up safe spaces for the rest of the team to engage with you and you to engage with the team. And that mindset, that open
Yeah,
mind, that vulnerability, that curiosity helps elevate performance, right?
exactly. Of everyone.
Okay. So let's go to the next question. So when you work with the physicians who are, so remember, we've said there's a hit or miss, and then
Yeah,
those that are hitting, they reach certain levels and we have to coach them through what that is. Do you ever spend time or think about, and these are the ones that are on a good trajectory, untraining them
mm,
or reversing some internal habits? Not that they're wrong or bad, but that
right.
they're constraining their ability to make these mindset shifts. Does this make any sense?
Oh my God, yes, thank you. Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes, yes, sir, yes, sir. And I, one of the one of the early questions I'm asking as I get an opportunity or somebody's referred to me, I want to know exactly what's the discipline you engaged in for the last 25 years as a physician, because it's always going to have some impact on the way in which you view the world. And again, we flip the switch one day, and on Friday you're this, and on Monday you're that in this executive leadership role. So I could stereotype if the internist is gonna go really deep, peel the onion back and, oh my gosh, well, we discovered one ocean and we have to boil that one and we move to the next one. Well, that would be great, but the organization's not gonna thrive that way. Or an ED doc is making, decisions in nanoseconds. But one of those, so I listen for those because some of it is unlearning, some of it is expediting their awareness. One that I find a lot, and you know this yourself, Lee, is you were either purposely or consciously or unconsciously trained to when you entered a space for a patient and they pulled back the, the curtain, you had to maintain a countenance, an expression that was fairly neutral, fairly flat to not create horror or any more anxiety in this patient that already exists. The truth is, when leaders have poker faces, sometimes they're so. I sometimes I joke with them. I'm like, I have a mirror. Can you fog it? When our right hemisphere can't figure out what a person's experiencing or feeling because their countenance is so flat that sometimes I have to teach them to say things like, "Uh-huh, yeah, yeah, I got it." It's not a big conversation, and some have a furrowed brow because they're thinking, but that can upset people around them. So that's another learning that what you had to do thousands upon thousands of times unconsciously now could be a liability. It's also great to be calm at the helm, as I believe, versus dysregulated, and I think that's another thing to unlearn. But I think about the last point I would make about this is you're expected to be on a team. Everybody at the top of the organization is on two teams, the team of their peers and the team they lead. The only person that's not on two teams in the organization is the person at the top. That's it. What is physicians have to rewire what does it mean to be team? The surgeon thinks I'm the team. Okay, you are. What is it? What's the orientation? What's the mind shift? That has to become very. It's like you learn to drive. Lee, did you check the mirror? Did you check the seat? Did you put your seatbelt on? You don't think that way anymore. That's where we have to move towards.
Such profound insights because it does go back to the earlier part of our conversation today about the identity of the physician who by desire to become a physician, to be competent, to be a clinician, to take on the competencies and the years of education and training, 14, 15, 16 years, the persona, the identity, it is not necessarily effective in an executive meeting. Again, if you know how to dial between bringing calm
Hmm.
versus having a flat feature or a flat affect or a reserved approach, which may bring calm to where a patient sits and
Exactly.
is perhaps a required competency when all hell was breaking loose or someone is having the very worst day of their life. But in the room where you're meeting about an organization or an enterprise, it's not so good. And the best compliment I ever got was breaking through a wall when we were having some team event and someone said, "Oh my God, Lee, you're actually human." Well, I mean, at the time, it didn't feel like a compliment, But
Wow.
in retrospect, I was beginning to show who I really was. And as a physician, and I think the term
Mm,
used is surface acting,
mm,
and we're not always our real selves because the conditions demand a level of that. In 250 milliseconds, someone is going to make an impression about you before they can have a thought. They're going to have a series of feelings and neurobiological, fireworks go off. And so, yeah, in a clinical setting, sometimes that is the most important thing that happens. Not
exactly.
so true in real life. So it's a rewiring and it's an undoing.
Yeah.
Did anything else you want to add to
No,
that?
I think that's exactly right, and I think that takes conscious, intentional effort. And again, I hold up a mirror respectfully and say, I'll say it. I right now I can't tell if you're buying what I'm saying, agreeing with what I'm saying, think I'm an idiot, and most other people aren't gonna say that to you, especially if you're a doctor. Because one of the things you know this to be true, it goes back to, your experience as a physician. You have your scrubs on, you're walking down the hall, and you have your name tag, and there's 2 letters past your name. You're a de facto leader.
Hmm.
By the authority imbued upon you, you're
Yep.
in a so what is the persona you're creating there? And I like what you said about that that acting that was required for the sake of creating an atmosphere for patients to trust in your direction and their future.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's go on to another item. So for the
Okay,
physicians that we're talking about on this upward trajectory, and they themselves recognize it, and they're looking for coaching, what is the 6 to 12 month experience look like if they engage in a coaching environment with you or anybody
sure.
with Andy? Give folks who have never done this, what does that first 6 to 12 months look like in the physician transition universe that we're talking about?
Great. So, first of all, the requirement is that if a physician, CMO, he or she is in that trajectory, there's a transition, or they're newer in the role, or maybe not. It is critical that this experience is set up as a investment in your success. I'm not interested in remedial. I used to do that when I was medical staff. Bad acting physicians were referred to me, and we're not interested in that. Thank you very much. So, number one, it's set up as an investment. Their sponsor, their boss, then if I unpack the process, a robust process would look like an initial conversation with their boss saying, this is where I would like for you to focus on with Lee. These are his areas of strengths, and he could be an even better version of himself if he did this, this, and this. And I'd like you to get to work with Lee on those facets. Great, thank you very much. Then we meet with you, Lee, and we would start to build rapport, build trust. Here, go back to what is your why? What is your remit? Tell me about your journey. Did you play sports ever as a kid? What sports you played might have an impact on how you lead. Were you a swimmer? Were you a bowler? Were you a wrestler? Were your results matter? That all matters. So we want to learn all of that. We then early on engage in a personality assessment to expedite the EQ. To what extent do they have a healthy level of the holy grail of EQ, which is self-awareness? Because if that was a baseball game, if you don't get the first base, you're never getting home. Number one. Number two, what are their values? Well, how are they wired? What are their motivations? And third of all, when they're stressed, what do they do that derails their effectiveness and their leadership? Critical to surface this and start to weave that into a development plan. We then set up a set of goals coming out of that, some expectations, some accountabilities. This is what you're going to work on. I'll be directive on that. I'll give resources. Somewhere not far down the road, two more things are going to happen that would be very meaningful. Lee, you're leading there's a meeting, you're having a team meeting. I would love to sit in and observe because the dynamics and the atmosphere you create, what we say is no one creates the weather in a room like a leader. What kind of weather do you create in the room, in the environment? Want to see that. I'm introduced as a coach. The next thing is when we're underway and people know you have a coach, I might interview a handful of people around you. We call it a
Mhm.
360. If Lee were a better version of himself 1 year from now, what would we experience? What's Lee's highest and best use? If Lee stopped doing this, what would make him even more effective? What are his start, stops, and continues? Very simple questions. It's amazing what we learn from it. And then I scrub the data, create an aggregate summary, share it with you, build it in development plan. And then we move along. So it's typically 2 meetings a month with the coach with these experiences woven into the fabric of a 6 month journey. And at some point, we want to check back in with your boss. What are you observing? What are you experiencing? By the way, you could help Lee if you were doing this with Lee. So It's very much, and again, it's tied to the system.
Hmm.
It's tied to the system goals. It's tied to the enterprise goals. So that's a
It's
quick drive-by.
Well, I think it's very holistic, and I think that it speaks volumes to, does the system want to invest? Does the boss want to invest? Does the team want to invest? In other words, everybody's rowing in the same direction, and it's
Correct.
not criticism, it's elevation. And with information, I was going to say
Mhm.
informed decisions, but it's really about information. And then try to bring all those mental models together. The
Yeah,
team sees your development, but the team could do this or the boss could do that. And so that this everybody, all boats rise in the tide is what I
that's
was
right.
trying to get to.
That's right.
So that's cool.
Everybody
So
wins when a leader gets better.
yeah, absolutely. So
Can I add
you've
one more
worked,
thing?
yes.
A lot of people refer to the work that we do as contextual coaching. It's really important, and I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah, you better
Uh,
explain that. Right. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so contextual coaching was working with a relatively new CMO, late in career, and told me when I met him, he had been a leader about 2 years, and he was in his early 60s. And I asked him, "How did you learn about leadership?" And he said, "I watched movies." I said, "You did? What kind of movies?" And it was there was a pregnant pause. He said, "Robert De Niro movies. Robert De Niro movies." Like, where he had a baseball bat in his hand one movie. Wow. File that away. About a month later, he says, Joe, I have something to tell you, something I'm troubled by. I was in a hallway yesterday, and Murph comes up to me in the main hallway and is just launches into me. Just labs, and something's off and something's broken. And I mean, he's here, he's escalating, I'm escalating, he's escalating, I'm escalating. And then he reaches over the desk, and he says, he's got a pencil in his hand, and I wanted to put this right in his jugular. So I'm glad you didn't. I have a couple of ideas of what you could do. Something a little bit better. So 6 months later, his boss, the president, comes to me and says, Joe, I was at a holiday party, and Mitch's wife came to me and said, John, I don't know. I heard about this guy, Joe Mazzenga. I don't know who he is, but he's changed our marriage. Whoa. So Mitch took the work that we were doing on becoming more regulated as a leader, not escalating with Murph, to settle it down, bring calm, bring direction. That's contextual. That's what we
Is
mean by real-time experiences.
And is it fair to say that the platform that you describe, where you're talking with the boss and the team and other peers, you are creating your own contextual understanding of where this person works and how they work? So
Exactly.
you're working within their own context and shaping their behavior in terms of the context that they work in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what we want to learn as much about the culture, the environment, how is conflict handled? How
Yeah.
is change management occurring? What's going on in the organization? But for him, I thought it was a breakthrough that he brought that to me.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that to add a layer of just a slight layer of complexity, one of the things that I have observed in teaching and working with other chief medical officers is contextual. Many physician leaders who work with coaches who have a more isolated approach, who haven't worked in health systems like you and your teammates, or haven't been a physician themselves, spend a tremendous amount of time just explaining context
Wow, interesting.
instead of, like, you can understand the healthcare context when the team delivers it to you. You're not, I don't understand what is that metric? What is that performance? What is it that the service line is trying to do?
Right, right.
So I would suggest that when people are seeking coaches and organizations are seeking to elevate team performance, that they work with people who really do understand healthcare
Yeah.
and the way the physician mind is set. Those are two strengths to look for
I
in the
I
coaching
I
universe.
love that. I love it. You called that out. Like, I'll give you an example, length of stay. Length of stay is a ubiquitous issue. There's so many handoffs. There's so much required to create growth and traction, handoffs, relationships, trust, collaboration, information, communication.
Keep
It's a
going.
rich
No, just
petri
kidding.
dish. Yeah, yeah. So that's the context.
Yeah,
And somebody at the top goes, "Move it."
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Figure it out.
Sure.
And the physician is capable, they know how to do it, but without all of those other skills and
Yeah.
all of the requirements that you just mentioned in this giant petri dish of healthcare, it's a struggle. And you don't want to spend time. And most physicians start out thinking they have the solution. It's kicking the patient out or kicking the doctor out who isn't kicking the patient out. Well, that's not the solution. It's case management, it's discharge planning, it's medication to the, it's involving hundreds of moving parts,
Yeah.
not just one part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've worked at the CEO and CMO interface, and I was curious if you have any observations. What do you think most CEOs want from a CMO, and where might even the strongest CMOs just misread and misunderstand that expectation?
I think an effective CMO learns to be bilingual. Bilingual is the language and the experiences of the CEO. So for one, years ago, I had a CEO I was coaching say to me in a weaker moment or an honest moment, Joe, this would be a really good gig if it weren't for the docs. Okay, I don't have it. I don't know what to do with that, but they are your economic engine. So I think a CMO can recognize what is that story there, how effective, because I don't think in a system can, if a CEO has a strained relationships with the physicians, we have an issue. And I think the CMO can be a bilingual translator in that, building that bridge, building that understanding, building trust, and recognizing the CMO needs to get smart really fast so that they don't have just one card they continue to play.
Hmm.
When you get to the top, you have to be agile, you have to adapt, you have to be flexible. What is keeping the CEO up at night relative to clinicians, physicians? What is that? Let's learn about that. Let's hear that. And let's not be, you guys were trained. I know this myself as a clinician, we're trained to fix problems. It shows up, it comes in on two legs and we fix it. Healthcare issues don't solve like that. They're much more like length of stay, too complicated. So how could I serve him or her? What are they struggling with? What don't they understand? Because they're probably not a physician.
Right, right.
So it's building that consigliere with them. That would be powerful.
Yeah, that is a great analogy for those of you who have not studied The Godfather, either by reading it or watching it. That is a term often applied in that setting by which you are a very personal counselor, confident
Yeah,
collaborator. You have a voice in the ear of someone who's ultimately going to make a decision. They might not accept your decision, they might disagree
yeah,
with your decision, but having the ability. And I know that most physicians have no training in this whatsoever. To report out to the intern, the third year reports to the fourth year reports to the intern to the resident is chief up the chain to the attending. And it's a report out. It's not trying to change the attending's mind and get them off of their diagnosis to yours. You're just hoping you had the right answer. And that's not
exactly.
always the case. And when you're working closely with a CEO, I've heard it said that it's very, very important, like you said, to know what keeps them up at night, but what value are you bringing to that leader? If you're just going to solve problems, that's not exactly what that leader's up at night thinking about a whole mixture of items, not a solution to a problem.
Right, right.
Uh,
Or
okay.
don't bring all the problems and lay them at the door.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a 30-minute dialogue. We
Yeah,
won't go there today.
yeah, not yet.
So, last question before we wrap it up. If you could give one piece of advice to the physicians who are listening to this, who have been thinking about their why and why now and why me, and thinking about emerging into the role of a CMO over the next few years, what do you think they should start doing differently now?
That's really great. I think
Joe,
I have to.
Joe, we never ask minimalist questions here. The more pause we get, the better the question that
Yeah.
was asked. So
Thank you. You got me. You got me. My pipe got filled up really fast with information. Number one, that I believe that we need more and more and more physicians in leadership roles in the country, in the world. Top, prepared, ready, impactful, influential. So we have to do a better job of this. Number two, I would think the it's not very sexy, but if you want to get better, find a way to get feedback. Find a way, fight for the when we teach this concept, we teach it as a tool. Give me the last 10%. What is it that you haven't told me about my effectiveness? Is there something about the way in which I engage, the way in which I treat people, the way I chew my food? What is it? I want to know. Give it to me. And you know what? When you're finished, I'm going to say 2 words. Thank you. Because we have to get better. We ultimately have to become the best version of ourselves, focused on our highest and best use. And when we can create an atmosphere where people can take you off a pedestal because you're a doc and say, Lee, you just cut that guy off in that meeting. He's probably not going to speak up again for a very long time because it happened in front of everybody. Thank you. Wow. Okay, I got to clean that up because I don't want to create that atmosphere. So if I would say there's one thing you can do, and underneath that, emotional intelligence and the 4 pillars are critical. Learn about them, read about them, recognize the complexity of what's there, because that's where we become brilliant, when we get that figured out.
And would you share what those 4 pillars are, just the nomenclature?
Absolutely. Holy grail, first base, self-awareness, followed by self-management. So Mitch in the hallway was escalating, dysregulating. He wasn't managing himself. Next is social awareness. How do I adjust to the audience? How do I work the audience? How do I adjust to what's happening to build rapport with them? And lastly is relationship management. All of that is building teams, coaching people, optimism, influence. It's a rich, rich landscape of information, and I would be happy to make resources available to you, Lee, that you could share.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I know you've written quite a bit about emotional intelligence, and
Yeah,
and that we might find something we could share
that'd be
with the
great.
audience
Happy
based
to.
on your work. So I think that's a great summary. It's sort of where we started with that physician mind and that physician training. And it's not enough to simply walk in the room and be curious. You have to be curious. You have to open your mouth and listen or read or receive that feedback and be willing to act upon it and
Exactly.
squeeze it a little bit more for that last 10%. It's not enough to just say, I love to learn. Well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it.
What's the difference?
Yeah. Well,
Thank you so much.
sure. Any other last thoughts before I give it a wrap?
You've wrung the sponge out here. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for all the great questions.
Well, thank you for being on the show. So great to do this with you together, have this conversation, and share all these insights with our audience. Quickly, how might people get a hold of you, contact you, connect with you?
You can go to NuBrickPartners.com, NuBrick, and there's spaces on there. My bio's on there, and there's ways to submit questions and interest in learning more.
Great. Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. If you want to learn more about transformational coaching at your organization, for yourself or others on your team, then go to NuBrickPartners.com, look at their website, look at their offerings, and lean into that. Be curious and then do something about it. If you want to learn more about transforming your career as a Chief Medical Officer, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll set you up with the CMO group and we'll talk about the things that you need to lead in healthcare. I talk with CMOs from all over the world and I love it. And I
Mm,
also love talking to my buddy psychologist, Joe Mazzenga, Andy Hartman, and the entire team at NuBrick. So
thank
everyone
you.
get out there, be a winner, be passionate, be a leader, but remember whatever you do, in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, let's be careful out there.